Hey everyone, this is Jono. So communities that struggle to grow and thrive all seem to wrestle with one key ingredient, and that is building community engagement. So in this video, I want to walk through what community engagement is, why it's important, how you measure it, and how you grow it. Okay, so let's dig in. Now, fundamentally, community engagement refers to members in your community who are active. Okay? These are people who are not just passively watching and consuming content, but they're actually creating and interacting with other members and with yourself. So this could be people who are posting messages, replying to messages, they could be answering questions, they could be creating content, speaking at your events, creating code, mentoring people, any number of different things, okay? These are the people you want to grow in your community. Now, here's the thing. I want to make sure that we're all clear on our goals here. Because if you look at a typical community, it looks like this. Let's say you've got 1,000 people in this community. The number of people in a healthy community that you can reasonably expect to be active is about this many, okay? It's about 20%. All right? Now, this is what I've seen in my experience of working with hundreds of different companies. There was some research that was done by Spotify into their Guilds program that determined this was pretty much a reasonable number that you should expect to be active as well. So that's kind of the goal that we got. Now, here's the thing, right? About 80%, therefore, of people in your community are not going to be active. And these are the people who are just going to be kind of consuming and enjoying the community. They're going to be reading, they're going to be watching the videos, they're going to be joining the events or just watching the replays of the events. They're not going to be actively creating material, all right? So to use an analogy, this group of people here are the people watching Netflix, and this group of people here are the people who are creating content for Netflix. So what we really want to do is we really want to zone in on this number. That's our target, is 20%. However, I would strongly recommend that when you're thinking about targets for the number of people you want to be engaged in your community, you actually shoot for 30%. I'm a big believer in stretch goals. If you just go for the minimum number, then you're never going to be truly unlocking the value in your community, all right? So before we get on to how we measure that number, let's talk about why these people are important, okay? Why we need to have active members in your community. And we can break it into three kind of key areas here, right? The first is that highly engaged members of your community are essential for community health, okay? Remember that 80% of people. Well, that 80% of people are consuming the content that the 20% of people are creating, okay? If you suddenly take out that 20% and no one's really posting or doing anything anymore, then the 80% of people are just not going to show up anymore, okay? So if you want to have a healthy, thriving community, then you need to have engaged members because they're going to be generating a whole bunch of the material there, okay? The analogy I like to use here is it's kind of like a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant on a Saturday night and it's empty, there's no one in there, you're not going to go in there. But if you see a restaurant and it's bustling, people are having a good time, the food looks reasonably good, then you're going to be more excited about going into that restaurant, okay? It's the same thing with our communities. So we really want to focus our energy and our efforts on generating that engagement because that's going to ensure that it's healthy. The second reason why engaged members are important is because here's an interesting nugget for you, is that value creation, that is people who create value, that's people who answer questions, create content, whatever it might be, you know, speak at your events. There's a direct correlation between value creation and good experience. All right. Again, this was something that kind of spun out of the Spotify Guilds research that I read a little while back. Is that, and I'd seen this myself, is that when people create value, when they're constantly creating content or material or they're answering questions, they feel like they're having a very positive impact in the community, right? This is one of the reasons why people love to do philanthropy, is they feel like they're doing some good in the world. So therefore, when you create an environment where your community members can create good value for the other 80% of folks, right? Those community members who are creating that value have a good experience, and therefore they want to keep coming back and keep doing it. And that's going to create sustainability in your community, all right? But also, you need these active, engaged members of your community to grow and scale, right? If you have 1,000 people in your community, like my example earlier on, and 20% of them are active and engaged, if you grow to 10,000 people, it still needs to be 20%. So you need to have more and more people in there to serve that broader group of people who are just consuming information, all right? So these This is the reason why engagement is so important. So therefore, when people struggle to build engagement in the community, it's unsurprising that the community can die on the vine, all right? So let's now talk about how we measure this 20% number, okay? Because I'm a big believer that instead of just setting goals, like goals are just a fiction of the future. What you want to do is you want to set a target metric, right? And because the metric is real. Metric is something we can measure today. Goals are something that we have to kind of invent and then aspire towards, right? So if we're measuring your community engagement right now, today, then we can move that number up and up and up with various activities, all right? So how do we measure that number? Well, what we do is we focus on something called DAU MAU. Okay, this is the magic, indecipherably named metric, all right? So essentially what we're doing is we're going to take the number of daily active users, all right, and we're going to divide it by the number of monthly active users. All right, now the way we define active will be somewhat unique to your community, but most community platforms have some metric for active, and that's people are going to be interacting like we were just talking about. Some people are going to be using their keyboard or their keyboard on their phone to interact in some way in your community, right? So let's say for the sake of argument, we've got, if we're going to say, first of all, daily active users, let's say we've got 10 people in your community who are active, right, today. So 10 different people in your community today replied to a question, they've posted something, they've created some content, whatever it might be, all right? Then we say, okay, well, how many active members have we had this month? Let's say it's 80. All right? So that's 80 monthly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our 10, we're going to divide it by 80, and that's going to get us to 0.125. All right? And then what we're going to do to figure out the percentage is we're going to times it by 100, right? And then that gets us to 12.5%. All right? So from that calculation, we know that today, based upon the daily active users today and based upon the number of monthly active users this month, we know that we're at 12.5%. And of course, we know that that is nowhere near, well, it's reasonably close, but it's too far away from 20%, right? We want to get that up towards the 20%. And remember, our actual goal here is we really want to get up to 30%. All right? Does that make sense? So that's how we measure it. Now, what I'd encourage you to do is to start measuring it right now. You might be thinking, oh, good grief, it's probably going to be terrible in my community. It might be 3 or 4%. Doesn't matter, okay? Don't let the fear of failure today hold you back from greatness in the future, okay? Absolutely start measuring it today. Because when you start measuring it today, what we're going to do is we're going to get into a growth mindset and move that forward. So one of the first things I do when I work with companies one-on-one is and I do this in my masterclasses as well, like such as my community experience masterclass, is I say to people, let's start measuring it today, and then based upon that number, we can figure out what we need to do to move it in the right direction, okay? So let's say you measure it today, and let's say you're at 11% or 10% or 9%, it doesn't really matter, okay? Now we need to move it in the right direction. Now I'm gonna make another video, which I'll link to at the end of this video when it's out, with some examples that you can do to focus on engagement right now. But first of all, what I want to cover in this video to wrap this up is how to build a growth mindset around engagement, okay? I know growth mindset is kind of overused by annoying people with spiky plastic hair and, customized license plates on their BMWs, but this is important, right? There's basically 4 things I want you to think about. So the first, helps if I actually switch the camera on. So the first one here is to set your monthly target. Okay, now we know what this is. Oh, don't need that. We know what this is, right? This is going to be 20% minimum or 30% stretch. Okay, so but let's just start here. Let's just start at the 20% for now. So every single week you want to measure this, or every month you want to measure this. I like to have an overall monthly measurement for this as your main measurement, but I like to track it every week. That's how I like to focus on it. So because if you go from one week and you're at 11% engagement, and then the next week you're at 12% engagement, then you're doing some things, you're heading in the right direction. If you go from 11% one week and it goes down to 9%, then you know that the things that you're doing aren't necessarily working in the right direction, all right? Now, the next thing you want to focus on is member needs. here's the thing. People will only engage in the community if they know that they're going to get something of value out of it, right? Now, I've talked about this in my other training courses and videos, that the way to do this is you figure out their pain points, right? What are they struggling with right now? Okay, so sit down, first of all. So let's say you figured out, okay, well, we're currently 11% DAU, MAU. Then what you do is you say, okay, well, who's our target audience? Let's say our target audience is going to be marketing professionals, right? And they want to run webinars. Okay, well, what are the things that they're struggling with? Well, they don't know how to create good topics. They don't know how to market them. They don't know how to get enough people there. People who register don't show up. Figure out all those pain points. And then what you do is you then brainstorm interaction events. Now, what I mean by an interaction event is how do I resolve one of those pain points in a way that generates something that's interactive. So for example, one of the things I like to do is what I call a conversation start, which is where you kick off a discussion for one of these pain points. So let's say it could be, for our example of marketers, you could say, hey everyone, what is a tip or a technique that you've used that's helped to get people into your webinar sessions, right? And then you get 5 or 6 people go in there and they reply with tips or techniques that they've used. Now what's happening is you've had 5 or 6 people engaged. That all contributes to your DAU, MAU metric, right? But also you're generating value in the community that 80% of your community can then go and enjoy and read, okay? So we want to focus on interaction events. Don't just understand what their pain points are and then don't do anything about it. Create something in your community, whether it's content or a conversation starter, or it could be you run a webinar or an event, it could be you have a hackathon, whatever it might be. Do something that's going to get people interacting in how they resolve that pain point. That is the most important thing to focus on. And then finally what you do is you track what works. This is really important, right? Let's say you kick off a discussion where you ask people for their tips and techniques to get people into their webinars, and let's say you have 30 responses in your community and you've got a fairly small community. That's a really successful thing, right? It wasn't just that question that you asked was successful, but also the means in which you did it was successful as well. All right, you know, the fact that you ask the question inside your forum or a Slack channel, whatever it might be. Let's say you run a community meetup that's online and no one shows up, then you know that that didn't work, and then we can try something else, okay? So set your target. This is DAU, MAU that I walked through earlier on. You can rewind this video to go and figure out how to calculate that. Brainstorm your member needs around their pain points, okay? Then what you do is you brainstorm interaction events. The key thing is getting people to interact in some way, right? And the lower the bar for interaction, the better. Typing a couple of lines into Slack or into a forum is a simple way to do that, right? Asking people to show up to an in-person event is a much more involved way of doing that. So focus on kind of very low friction interaction events and then track what works, all right? And what that will do is when you apply these techniques and you measure it effectively, is that you will build your engagement. You'll get more and more people into that magic 20% slot that we're going for, and that will then generate a lot of activity that will encourage the rest of the folks to kind of keep coming back, and you'll grow and you'll grow and grow. The most important thing as you do this is keep measuring that DAU, MAU every single week, every single month. If you stop measuring things, they won't get better, all right? Anyway, I hope this was useful, hope this was helpful. If you've got any questions, let me know. Be sure to share this video with your friends, with your colleagues if you think they'll find it useful. Be sure to go and like and subscribe to me, and I'll see you on the next one.